disregard their health and safety. Mary and Joseph trusted in you and welcomed Jesus into our broken world. God Almighty, we ask their intercession to protect the preborn and their mothers, and to guide all parents in raising their children. May they help us build a civilization of love by upholding the sacredness of life and accompanying and supporting pregnant women in need. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Dr. And up here as doctors, we're really happy that you guys are here too.
Yeah.
Yes. Find 100 of your friends and just tell them all to vote no on 4.
Afraid.
Me?
Thank you.
Stand strong because you're in the heaven of this deception.
Yes.
I pray that you're gifted with the voice and the actions necessary to overcome yourself, needing to do what you're called to do. God bless you.
Bless you. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Bishop.
Good morning, CCC. Thank you. All right. Oh, thanks so much. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Well, thank you. We're here with a number of doctors, and you're going to hear from some of them from Florida, but mostly from the Tampa Bay area. We also have the Secretary of our Agency for Healthcare Administration, Jason Weeda, our Secretary for Florida Department of Children and Families, Siobhan Harris. Both of them have done an outstanding job. And then we've got a guy that maybe you've heard about, Coach Tony Dungy from Tampa Bay. So we've got these amendments on the ballot, 3 and 4, and people will ask me, like, Governor, what is the deal with these? Like, I don't really, understand what they'll do. I see these commercials, all this stuff, and so I think it's important that people go into this eyes wide open and just understand that you're talking about amending the Constitution of Florida. That's different than what the legislature does. They can pass a bill, put a bill on my desk, and I can sign or veto it. If I sign it, it goes into law. If you don't like it, you can elect different legislatures. I mean, I saw some of our representatives here from Pinellas County. That happens all the time. Constitution, like, that's playing for keeps. Once it's in there, the legislature cannot amend it through normal legislation. So my view is your default when they are proposing constitutional amendments should be no. That should be the default position. The people that propose an amendment have a very high burden to prove to you why you should amend this Constitution and then take these decisions away from the people of Florida through normal elections and the normal political process, because that's what you're doing. And so they have to prove that to you. So when you're reading these amendments, if you don't know what some of the words mean, if you don't know what this would do, if you don't have a very firm sense of that, you should vote no. And I don't care where you stand on these issues. This is about something even bigger than normal issues. This is something that is going to be a part of Florida forever. And to go into this without having a firm understanding of what it's going to do, and what a ridiculous way to govern, that you can have special interests write an amendment out of state, in Amendment 4's case, a weed company that traded on the Canadian Stock Exchange in Amendment 3's place. They have now, on Amendment 4, they have spent $120 million. They're not doing that for their health. They have an agenda. They're going to make money. On Amendment 3, just one mega weed corporation has poured in $140 million. And oh, by the way, that company's CEO wrote Amendment 3. And so you have to ask, is this the way to govern? You write a vague amendment that people can't even agree on what it means. You flush $100 million, and most of what they're doing on Amendment 4 is just basically spewing lies about the state of Florida. People caught on to that because they get different advertisements saying that basically what Florida does and what Florida law is. So they've lied about that. So now they're running ads talking about Ohio and Georgia. Well, what does that have to do with Florida? So this is what it is. So this is not the way to do business. I don't care where you are on any of these issues. This just stinks to high heaven. So default should be no. They got to prove to you that you know. And there are certain things when these amendments, if there was a proposed amendment, which we eventually adopted in Florida, it shall require a vote of 2/3 of each house of the legislature to raise taxes. I support that, and that's in the Constitution now. Maybe you don't, but everyone knows what that means, right? Very clear, very simple. This Amendment 4, this is an intentional deception on the public. They did this intentionally. And so this is really, really bad. Now, it's interesting because they spent tens of millions of dollars lying about Florida a law, and we've had a lot of physicians that have shot that down. And just let me say very clearly, because you hear these ridiculous things about, if a mother has a miscarriage, that somehow you wouldn't be eligible to. That is a lie. But not only is it a lie, some of these physicians that are out there, palling around with Amendment 4 people, that if they do that in their practice, they are committing malpractice in the state of Florida. They should lose their medical license in the state of Florida. And honestly, they should be sued to high heaven for medical malpractice. It's ridiculous that you would inject things that are totally false. They also will talk about, look, these are very difficult subjects. You start talking about, just as a dad and being there for my wife when we had our 3 kids, none of this is easy to do. And then you have situations that are fortunately rare, but then do happen. Situations where you may have a woman who's raped. It's a terrible thing. And they're running these ads. Florida has exceptions for that. Florida has exceptions, of course, for the health of the mother, life of the mother, incest, victims of human, all that stuff. And yet that's what they're focused on. So they're lying to you, saying that this is the case when it's not, therefore vote for their amendment. But they don't tell you much about their amendment. They don't want to go through what any of these means. They haven't defined the terms for you. They haven't flushed out any of the implications, because it's basically one bait and switch. So what does this amendment actually do? And oh, by the way, to have a group do $14 million funded by a left-wing Swiss billionaire, this 1630 fund, research that fund. They've poured $14 million into passing Amendment 4. How is it okay to have foreign money pouring in to these amendment fights? What does this have to do with Switzerland? Nothing. And yet we have massive amounts of money. So what does this say about what it's doing? The fact that there's no definition should cause you to have alarm bells right off. There is not a single definition here. And understand, when you're talking about the Constitution, this trumps anything that's in Florida law. The legislature cannot legislate around this. This will be permanent. And so when they talk about so there's a couple things I think are important. One is, this is the first amendment that's ever been proposed, in my knowledge, that will actually repeal rights for people, because it eliminates the right of parental consent for minors. And they do that. It's a bait and switch. They say nothing in this amendment challenges the legislature's authority to require notification to a parent or guardian. Every single parent out there knows notification is not the same as consent. So in Florida, they can't give your kid a Tylenol without your consent. They can't perform medical procedures on your child without your consent as a parent, and yet abortion will be accepted from that. They'll send you a postcard or a text message or something telling you, oh, I just want you to know, and I'll go into more about this amendment actually green-lights non-physicians to play an important role in green-lighting late-term abortion. So they basically, you would not have the right as a parent to withhold your consent. They would send you notice, oh, by the way, your child's here, we're getting ready to do, an abortion in the 8th month. We got this physician's practitioner or these clerks at Planned Parenthood, whatever, and you couldn't stop that. That's very, very dangerous. And so it revokes the right of parental consent. They do not want to acknowledge that. They're trying to say it's not. Notification is not consent. It's very deceptive what they're doing, but notification is not the same. Consent is the standard, and that should apply across the board. And think about it. There are things that minors can be given that are honestly very, relatively low impact and not necessarily like an earth-shattering decision, and yet we require parental consent for that. Why would you take a major potential surgery and accept that from parental consent? The groups that are behind this, because we have parental consent in Florida, and they had to take it off their website, but they would advise minors how to evade Florida law and get around parental consent. They don't believe in the rights of parents. They don't care at all. And you will see real serious problems if this is enacted. The other thing it does is it talks about no restrictions, no regulations, nothing on abortion until what they say is viability. Do they define viability? No. And now keep in mind, I think some people read it and think that means like if the pregnancy's viable, because if you have a non-viable pregnancy, but that's not an abortion if the pregnancy isn't viable. So that's not what they mean. What they mean, and this will likely be something that they sue over, they would mean elective abortions on demand for no reason whatsoever through 26 weeks. So 6 months, you can have an unborn child fully formed, beating heart, can feel pain, and they can be aborted. And when you're at that stage, it's a dismemberment procedure. They got to dismember, they got to pull the body parts of the baby and the child. How is that something that should be in the Constitution of the state of Florida? They don't want to talk about that. They don't want to acknowledge that. That has nothing to do with any extenuating circumstances, and there are extenuating circumstances, but fortunately they're very rare. This is just on demand for no reason. And why would this happen? Well, because the industry will make money off of it. You got fathers that don't want to accept responsibility, so they push very vulnerable women into doing. There's a whole host of reasons why it would happen. But the bottom line, that would be in Florida's Constitution for those dismemberment abortions to be not regulated in any way. And I think everybody agrees at some point, regardless of whether you're strongly pro-life, more ambivalent, even if you're for abortion, there is a limit to when you can't do this to this unborn child and put them through that amount of pain. And yet that's what this does. But here's the thing, as bad as that is, in some respects it's even irrelevant, because there's a loophole in the amendment. Because it says viability, we don't know what it means, but I think it means something that would be very bad in terms of what people would think would be acceptable in a civilized society. But they said or when necessary to protect the patient's health as determined by the patient's health care provider. So they don't define health, and we have exception for health, but it's defined in Florida law. And so it's something that is obviously momentous. This could be whatever a health care provider says. And notice, so there's really effectively no limits. It's really up until the moment of birth, for all intents and purposes. The legislature will not be able to limit this scope. You can't. It's a constitutional amendment. But this healthcare provider language is very significant, because I know people who are not pro-life, but they want abortion to be rare. They don't celebrate it like some on the far left do, but their view is like, look, they don't want legal protections for the unborn. They would rather it just be left to the mother consulting with the doctor about the baby's future. And there's a lot of pro-lifers obviously believe that the child has rights, but that's the argument, and that's the argument that's always been made. This doesn't say doctor. A healthcare provider is not the same as a doctor. There are a lot more healthcare providers and people that qualify for that than there are medical doctors. So this is allowing non-physicians to green-light abortions up until the moment of birth. How does that say the mother talking to the doctor? That is totally throwing the core argument on its head. And they did this for a reason. They could have written doctor. They could have written physician. Why did they not do it? I think for money. They will make more money by having non-physician staff these, and I think these are going to be very dangerous clinics that pop up if this passes, because I don't think you're going to be able to do much to regulate. If you look at the way the language is, you can't penalize, delay, or restrict, and so any safety regulation will delay. There's certain things that will delay. So I think that's a huge can of worms, but why? They did healthcare provider instead of physicians. And I think if you look at California, I think if you look at Minnesota, some of these places that do abortion till birth, I don't think they have said non-physicians. I think this may be the first in the country, but this is crazy change from any argument that had ever been made, either pro or against right to life. And this cannot be changed. The legislature would not be able to come in and say, well, healthcare provider really just means a physician, because you're going to have non-physicians that'll be able to sue in court and say, hey, I'm a healthcare provider. I'm not a doctor, but the Constitution says healthcare provider, and I qualify. Very, very dangerous. And I think it's doubly dangerous in Florida, because if you look at our country, from Texas to South Carolina along the southeast, every one of those states has pro-life legislation. And so you will have Florida become the epicenter where people will be recruited to come into Florida, and they are going to be doing this with non-physicians manning the posts. And that's very, very dangerous, and that's not anything anybody has ever thought was acceptable in the past. The other thing that's important to know, and you wouldn't know it from this, This is going to lead to taxpayer funding of abortion. How do I know that? Because they passed something similar in Michigan, and once it passed, the left-wing groups went into court and they filed the lawsuit saying that because of this constitutional provision, you have to provide public funding for these abortions. And obviously, the people that are pursuing this, they're not spending $120 million, just for kicks. They're doing it because they're going to make a lot of money off this. And if they can conscript the taxpayer to fund their operations, oh man, of course they're going to try to do that. So they will file a lawsuit if this passes. They'll find a liberal judge, and they will try to get a ruling that this provision, even though it says nothing about tax funds, that this provision requires taxpayer funding of abortion. So I think you should assume that that is something that well, certainly the lawsuits will happen, but as we've seen in Florida, I mean, you can always find a liberal judge that's going to do something, and so that's what will happen in this situation. And how many people, again, regardless of where you are on right to life, how many people honestly think tax dollars should be funding this, especially when you talk about elective abortions, all the way late-term abortions, which is what this will do. So you basically have taxpayers funding procedures that would cause an unborn child really excruciating pain. I don't think people want their tax dollars going to that. So this is a big, big problem with what this is. How this is written is deceptive. I think as people figure out, you definitely see support for it decline, because it's just way too crazy to say healthcare provider instead of physician, to have a loophole where there's no meaningful limits, to take away parental consent, to be funded by foreign money. I mean, give me a break. So this is something you should go into eyes wide open. And obviously, I think you should vote no, but I think more important to me is just everyone has a full understanding of what they're getting into. What I don't want to see is to have this or the other one pass, and then a year from now, people say, oh, I didn't know it was going to do that. I didn't know. They don't want you to know, but we're telling you what is going to happen if this thing passes. And so the vast, vast majority of people, this is just way, way, way too much for them. And the more people understand that, I think that you're going to continue to see more and more people come up to oppose it. Now we're going to bring up some of the physicians. We're going to bring up some of the other folks, that we have here. We'll start with the physicians, all my secretaries, and then we'll have Coach Dungy bat cleanup. So we've got a couple physicians, Kathy Altman, and then Dr. Anna Verdeja Perez. I know she told me I didn't have to say the whole name, but it's on my So we're going to have them up. We're going to have our secretaries. Then we're going to have Coach Dungy come up. So let's start with Kathy Altman. She's a retired OB-GYN from here in the state of Florida.
My husband says I'm vertically challenged. My name is Kathy Altman. Thank you so much for coming. I'm a board-certified OB-GYN. I'm a board-certified OB-GYN with over 35 years of experience, and I used to do first trimester D&C with suction abortions and second trimester D&E or dismemberment abortions in Jacksonville and Gainesville. I was also the lead author on the paper, Deaths and Severe Adverse Events After the Use of Mifepristone as an Abortifacient from September 2000 to September 2019. Despite what the abortion industry is telling you, abortions are dangerous. Amendment 4 is dangerous. If passed, abortionists and their clinics will no longer be held to the same standards as other practitioners. Abortion will no longer be limited to physicians, nor will the clinic be required to have a transfer agreement with a nearby hospital to handle life-threatening emergencies. Ultrasounds to rule out ectopic pregnancy and confirm gestational age will no longer be required, putting women at increased risk. The risk of complications and death increases with gestational age. But the magnitude of this risk cannot be accurately quantified because the FDA no longer requires abortion pill providers to report complications other than death. Only 28 states report abortion complications to the CDC, and 4 states, including California, one of the biggest abortion providers, provide no data on abortion to the CDC. That's the only reason the abortion industry can claim that abortions are safe. International studies where meticulous records are kept confirm much higher complication rates. Few people are aware that the FDA requires a black box warning on the abortion pill mifepristone. That's the highest safety-related warning that can be assigned to medications, but it's safe. Complications from abortions, and these will be hitting our emergency rooms because they don't take care of their own complications, include hemorrhage, infection, sepsis, injury to internal organs, including laceration of the cervix, perforation of the uterus, and injury to the bowel and bladder, uterine rupture, missed and ruptured ectopic pregnancy, ongoing pregnancy, infertility, psychological complications, the need for surgery to remove retained products of conception, major surgery to repair damage to internal organs, hysterectomy to stop hemorrhage, and death. We saw women with some of these severe and devastating complications in our emergency department, of course at a much lower level than will be occurring now if this passes. And many were documented in the adverse event reports submitted to the FDA. Abortion is not health care. Neither my partners nor I ever needed an abortion to manage serious pregnancy complications. We sometimes had to deliver a patient early, and the baby may not have survived, but we knew that was not an abortion because it was our intent to keep both that woman and that baby, if possible, alive. Our state has issued guidance stating that the current law does not prevent physicians from treating miscarriage, ectopic pregnancy, premature rupture of membranes, and trophoblastic disease. Yet advocates of Amendment 4 continue to spread the deceptive lie that our current laws prevent women from getting treatment for those conditions. Those unhappy with our current abortion law should work with our elected officials to change it. Trying to change the law using an irreversible, extreme constitutional amendment is like using a chainsaw to remove an appendix. The unintended consequences will be catastrophic. Whether you are pro-life or pro-choice, vote no on Amendment 4. Thank you.
Good job. Good job. Ardana.
Good morning, and thank you for the privilege of having me here to discuss a very crucial topic, which is Amendment 4 and its devastating consequences for women. I'm Dr. Ana Verdeja. I'm a board-certified OBGYN, and I've been practicing for the past 24 years in Plant City, Florida, and I'm speaking on my own behalf. Personally, I want to thank Governor DeSantis for going above and beyond the call of duty to inform our constituents about how crucial it is to be well informed about the truth of this amendment. He has been all over the state trying to educate our communities about the horrible consequences to our women, our families, and our state if this amendment makes it into our Florida Constitution. It is very important that our communities know how doctors feel about the content of this amendment and why we are against it. Our coalition of Florida doctors against Amendment 4 has collected over 700 signatures across the state of doctors that have united to voice this grave concern. As part of this coalition, I'm here to tell you all about it. As the governor mentioned earlier, Amendment 4 was written in very vague language and without definitions to allow abortion at any time of the pregnancy and for any reason, abortion without us doctors, and abortion without parental consent. In our state, we have existing laws in place that offer the choice of abortion to women facing difficult pregnancies due to rape, incest, and human trafficking. These laws protect our women. They also allow us doctors to act in the event the woman's life is at risk and save her without hesitation. Unfortunately, all the ads in favor of Amendment 4 are full of lies and misleading information. They have created confusion among voters, and even some of my fellow doctors here in Florida have fallen prey to the political deception. Don't fall for the scare tactics. The supporters of Amendment 4 want to politicize the medical community instead of letting us doctors do what we know best, which is take care of our patients with the best medical treatments. Our abortion laws protect the life of the vulnerable women who seek in the abortion. Amendment 4 eliminates all those protections. As a physician who took the oath to do no harm, I simply cannot vote in favor of this amendment. I beg you, for the sake of our vulnerable women and their babies, please vote no on Amendment 4. I already did.
Okay. Oh, I thought you were done. Okay, go ahead.
Familias hispanas, humildemente les pido que voten no en esta tan peligrosa enmienda número 4. Esta enmienda permitirá el aborto hasta las 40 semanas de embarazo y por cualquier razón. También permitirá que personas que no son médicos hagan abortos sin poder atender las posibilidades de complicaciones en un aborto. Esta enmienda también eliminará el permiso de los padres de niñas menores de edad que buscan hacerse un aborto. Desgraciadamente, los anuncios que han salido recientemente a favor de la enmienda están llenos de mentiras y de información incorrecta. Estos anuncios han creado mucha confusión en nuestra comunidad. Inclusive han engañado a muchos de mis colegas médicos con el propósito de empujar una agenda política para salvar un negocio muy lucrativo. No se dejen engañar por el miedo que estos anuncios han creado. Los que apoyan la enmienda 4 solo buscan proteger su bolsillo en vez de preocuparse porque los médicos pueden hacer su buen trabajo de tratar a las mujeres con su mejor cuidado médico. Las leyes que existen en el presente protegen la vida de la mujer que se somete a un aborto. La enmienda 4 elimina todas esas protecciones. La enmienda 4 no ofrece nada bueno para la salud de nuestras mujeres ni de nuestras hijas. Debemos actuar con valentía y proteger a nuestras mujeres y sus bebés. Les pido que voten no en esta enmienda. Yo ya lo hice.
And one of the things that Anna said about, some of these physicians that are parroting the lies of Amendment 4, first of all, you need to know what Florida law is, and Florida law not only allows, but it requires that you provide health care in the situations where they claim somehow you can't. So it's a total lie, and is medical malpractice if they are in a situation where a mother has a miscarriage and they say you can't get treated for it. That's a lie. And so you're either too incompetent to be a doctor because you can't read, in which case you should lose your medical license, or you're putting your political agenda ahead of the health of your patients, in which case you should not be a doctor in the state of Florida. And I think we should look at, I've got some of our legislators here. You have a right to sue for medical malpractice in those situations if that were to happen. I think a lot of what you're seeing in Florida, this didn't even happen in Florida in terms of the things they're citing. They're saying, oh, this could, no. But if somehow it did, where a doctor did that, they obviously could lose their license. They're eligible for malpractice suits. And I work with the legislature. Let's let someone ring them up to smither, let them get massive money judgments in there, and that just shows you how ridiculous the lies are. So I'm totally willing to do that. That if you have a physician not providing needed health care in these situations, which obviously Florida law contemplates, allows, and requires, you should not only get sued, you should have to pay a massive money damage, massive malpractice verdict. And I think that would be totally appropriate because it's a level of incompetence that, anyone that's not even a doctor would know, but to be a doctor and be that incompetent, I can't believe. I know we've got some not all physicians are good, just like anything. And good Lord, I saw it during COVID, unfortunately. But even with that, I don't think it's incompetence. I think it's an agenda. I think that this is more, I think that it's a passive-aggressive posture doing that, and that's really troubling. That is really, really troubling that you would play politics with folks' lives like that. So, okay, Jason Weed, ACA.
Good morning, and thank you, Governor, for your leadership and for really setting the record straight with all the misinformation being pumped out there by Soros-backed activists and advocacy groups. It's great to have a leader who's willing to speak the truth to those groups and to you all and to voters in the voter booth. The governor covered a lot of ground. The doctors have covered a lot of ground. One thing I wanted to drill down on a little bit, some of the governor already mentioned, Amendment 4 would invalidate any law or regulation, and there's a lot of them. The legislature represented here has done a great job crafting laws, and the agencies have crafted regulations to protect women's health and safety. It's something that's very important to our agency, very important to our state. But what this amendment would do is that it would take all of those protections that we worked to pass and to promulgate through rule and put them in the hands of the courts. Because once you put something in a constitution, the legislature can't do anything about it. It's all in the hands of the courts. So I just want you to know about some of the things that would be in jeopardy if Amendment 4 were to pass. Basic things like licensing and sanitation requirements for abortion facilities. These are things that people can argue would potentially delay or restrict. Admitting privileges, medical screening requirements, waiting periods that ensure women have relevant information about the choice they're thinking about making, required in-person counseling prior to an abortion, required informed consent literature to be available in abortion facilities, ultrasound requirements, regulations surrounding abortion procedures and methods that ensure women are treated safely and fairly. So again, these would all go to the courts. There's many courts in Florida. It would take years to kind of figure out how the courts come down on this. There would be varying decisions until it got figured out by the Florida Supreme Court. And then you have women being treated differently, different types of safety measures in place in Pensacola and Key West. And that's just not how it should be. Right now, the Florida legislature has laws in place to protect women, and the one thing I want to leave you with right now is that women would be unsafe if Amendment 4 were to pass. So again, thank you for your leadership.
Okay, thanks so much. Okay, Department of Children and Families, Siobhan Harris.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Governor DeSantis, for your unwavering leadership on this particular issue. There's nothing more precious than life, and at the department, our mission is focused on protecting children at all stages of life. The legislature has supported and invested in a multitude of programs that ensure moms and babies can thrive. Millions of dollars have been appropriated to help support that aim. Programs that help parents be self-sufficient in caring for their family, parenting education classes, and so many others. Under this governor, we are the most pro-child, pro-family state. We cannot afford to backslide. Amendment 4 is written intentionally vague to give you a false sense of assurance that all it does is restore the status quo before the passage of the Heartbeat Protection Act. The ad campaigns in support of the amendment have been intentionally misleading with the sole focus to incite fear. That's why we think it's so vitally important to ensure that good information is being shared with the public, because knowledge is power. There are many aspects of the amendment that are concerning: its lack of definitions, as the governor mentioned, and potential ability to strip the legislature of its authority in clarifying any of these ambiguities. But one of the most concerning aspects is the fact that the authors thought it sufficient to only require parental notification and not consent. I'm a mom of 2 girls. It's inconceivable that anyone thinks that it's okay that a parent would not have the right to be able to consent to such a critical and an invasive procedure. At 17, my daughter wasn't allowed to open up a bank account without my consent. I tried to take her, I tried to have her schedule a dermatology appointment to refill her acne cream, and she went without me, and they sent her home. They said that I had to be there. Okay? Those are the laws of the land. So again, you cannot tell me that it's A-okay to just call me and leave a voicemail or a text message without me being involved in such a critical decision. It should give everyone great pause that a topic as important as this has been reduced down to a few ambiguous sentences without the opportunity for real debate, which could be codified in our Constitution for years to come. I have many roles in this life, but the most important one is my role of being a mom to my 2 girls and to protect them. And as a mom, I feel like this amendment strips my ability to do so appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thanks so much, and the DCF's done great work at standing up for kids in a variety of different situations and for moms, which is very, very important. But one of the things we've done, and largely, I think, spearheaded with inspiration from our next speaker, Coach Tony Dungy, is we've stressed the importance of fatherhood in the state of Florida. You look around society, and there's a lot of things. If you could just kind of flip a switch, maybe you change. But if you can pick one thing and say every single child that comes into this world has a loving mom and a loving dad, we would have so much fewer problems. We'd have fewer people in prison. We'd have fewer dropouts in school, fewer kids on drugs. And Coach Dungy has recognized this and has really led a great effort based right here in the Tampa Bay area with All Pro Dads. And it's something we work with when I first became governor, but we wanted to take it to the next level. So our Fatherhood Initiative, I think it's been like 70 million organizations and programs that are helping dads, promoting fatherhood, doing things that are going to make a difference in our communities. And Coach Dungy, he's had a great life. He was an NFL player. He was a Super Bowl winning head coach. And honestly, the Tampa Super Bowl, he built that team here in Tampa. And he's an analyst on TV, so he could just basically kick his feet up and to hell with all the stuff in society. He's got a great life, but he sees issues like the absence of fathers and what it does, particularly to our young boys and young men, and he wants to do something about it. I mean, he's a proof that, as Edmund Burke said, the way for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. And he's not just doing nothing, he's doing something, and he's making a big difference. And the same thing with this Amendment 4. He doesn't need to be involved in this. He's got a lot of stuff going on. He's done well. He's revered in terms of his football, and yet he's coming up and he's working hard to not only just take a stand, but to educate people. And some of the things he's put out, there's a lot of people that saw that, and because of how trusted he is, they've changed their view. They thought Amendment 4 did things, and then they realized the truth about it, and so now they're voting no. So just as governor, we've got a great state, we've got a lot of great people. It really is meaningful when people who go in there, put some skin in the game when they don't have to make a difference. And I think Coach Dungy Dungy has done that time and time again for this community and for the people of Florida, and we're honored to have him here at this press conference. So, Coach.
Thank you very much, Governor DeSantis. I just so appreciate everybody up on the stage. I read this Amendment 4, and it was written by the same people who wrote the amendment in my home state of Michigan. And Governor DeSantis is exactly right. That amendment passed. People thought it was going to be, oh, just okay, and it's been used to do some harm, damage, and lawsuits and funding of abortions. People never thought it was going to happen. And it hurts me to be from Michigan to see that happen, and I don't want to see that happen in Florida. Same people that wrote it, the same vague language is written here. Glad to see the governor, secretary talk about that and what that means. I did a 3-minute video to try to educate people on that, and it's important. We need to know what we're voting for. You can vote for or against, but please know what you're voting for. I thank these medical people to come up here and talk about what this means medically and what it doesn't mean and dispel some of the fears. I am so upset when people say, oh, we need to get this passed because women in Florida are in danger when they're pregnant. No, they're not in danger when they're pregnant. Okay? We have health care. We have some of the best health care in the world here, and it's available. Okay? And it's not going to be withheld if this amendment doesn't pass. So that's important. But even more important to me and my family, it's personal, because I happen to believe that these babies in the womb are lives. And I know everybody doesn't believe that, but I happen to believe it. My Bible tells me that they are, and I know everybody doesn't believe that. But for me, that's what's important. My wife Lauren and I have 8 adopted children in our home right now. And when I go home every day and I look at those kids, I don't see 8 choices. I'm sorry, those are 8 lives. And yes, we need to protect our women. Yes, we need to protect our mothers, but we need to protect those children as well. My 8 kids are not old enough to vote yet, but I promise you if they could, they'd be voting no. So we need to help them and vote no on this for our kids, for our moms, for our state. We need to do the right thing, please.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, thanks so much, Coach Dungy. Thanks to the physicians. Thanks to everybody. I think you have a very compelling message in terms of the problems of this amendment. For people on both sides of the abortion debate generally can agree that you don't take away the rights of parents. You don't have no meaningful limits. You do not open the door for taxpayer funding of abortion. And you ought to tell people what your amendment's going to do. You shouldn't just have a vague amendment and then punt it all to the courts so that liberal judges get to rule the state of Florida. That's not what we want. So thanks everyone for that. I just want to say while we're here, you know, we have Amendment 4. We also have Amendment 3. And again, I think it's important to ask, how did this get here, Amendment 3? It wasn't put on by the people at all. It was written by the CEO of a major mega marijuana corporation. Like, that's admitted. So, and this is a corporation that's publicly traded on the Canadian Stock Exchange. So as a CEO, you have a fiduciary duty to maximize returns for your shareholders. So you could not write an amendment that was good for Florida but somehow bad for your company. In fact, you have to write the amendment that is going to allow your company to monetize this as much as possible. That's the duty. So just understand what's going on here. It's a one company CEO writing an amendment. And how much have they put into it? $141.9 million to buy their way into your Constitution in the state of Florida. I don't care if you hate weed or you love weed. Is there anybody thinks that this is a healthy way to conduct a Republican form of government? Of course it's not. It's a total farce. So that's how it got on the ballot. And if you vote yes on 3, you are voting to enrich this company, because they wouldn't have spent $141 million if they didn't think they'd make a hell of a lot more money on the back end, I can tell you that. And not only is that a problem, but the way this is written, it's so egregious what they're doing. So, for example, you'll sometimes hear, like the media say, questions about marijuana legalization. That's not really the question, for 2 reasons. One, we already have safe and regulated marijuana in Florida. It's medical marijuana. We've got almost 1 million people in the state that have these marijuana cards. Is every one of those almost 1 million suffering from a debilitating condition? No, not even close. I mean, let's just be honest here, right? How many marijuana stores do we have in Florida? They're everywhere. So I don't buy this idea that somehow, you know, it's illegal in Florida. It's regulated. There's certain things, but the reality is we don't have it overrunning all our public places as a result of having it be regulated. So that's the first thing in terms of this. The second thing, this is not a full legalization of marijuana at all, because they do not give you the ability to grow your own. So yes, you'll have a, quote, right to possess and smoke up to 3 ounces, which is more than California, Colorado by far. It's 100 joints. You'll have a right to possess and smoke marijuana, but only if you buy it from them. Only if you buy it from them. They didn't put in here that you could cultivate. Why? Because they'd make less money if people grew it in their backyard. So they did not put that in here for a reason. Now they'll say, oh, we could only do one subject. They gave themselves the ability to cultivate it. Are you telling me you couldn't do it? You could have written, if all you cared about, you could have written one, no criminal penalties for possession, whatever, but the state can regulate, time, place, and manner. They could have done that. They didn't do it. They chose to do this. So you got to buy it from them. They're forcing transactions to guarantee themselves a flow of money. And get this, the gall to want to put this into the Constitution. They are giving themselves total immunity of civil liability. And again, what you'll get on your ballot is a summary that was written also by the CEO of the company. It does not inform you fully about what the amendment does. You will not get the text of the amendment on your ballot. You got to go online, you got to pull this up. So if you just read the summary, you wouldn't know what I'm about to tell you is in this amendment, which is also a farce. That's why the Supreme Court should have never let this on the ballot. The summary is supposed to fully inform the voter what they're voting on. This doesn't do it. But listen to what it does. So any of these chosen, so they're creating a cartel where they're going to be able to effectively have the dominant market position. And then they say any of these chosen companies acting in accordance with this section as it relates to acquiring, cultivating, processing, manufacturing, selling, and distributing marijuana products to adults for personal use shall not be subject to criminal or civil liability or sanctions under Florida law. That is blanket immunity. There's no exceptions for negligence. There's no exceptions for product liability. So they sell you marijuana, you have a seizure, you can't sue them. Distributing, if they have a truck that's driving weed to one of their dispensaries and they run somebody over, you can't sue them. This is a blanket grant of immunity. Again, the words matter. The words matter. It doesn't matter what they may tell you in a commercial. if this passes, they are going to cite this language, and a court is going to apply the language as written. And if there's no exceptions to this, that means they're bulletproof. Total immunity. Is there anyone who's gotten that? This is like big pharma on steroids that they're doing here. So this is just ridiculous. People that love weed do not think this is appropriate. People that hate weed obviously don't think it's appropriate. This is bad governance. This has no place in this Constitution of the state of Florida. Now, one of the reasons that they'll say, and they get some people that are sympathetic to this because, you know, most Floridians are not using this, although more will if this passes, which I don't do. Do we think having more people use will be better for the state of Florida? It hasn't worked out that way in Colorado, California, I can tell you that. But they'll say, well, you know, we don't want somebody rotting in prison just because they smoked marijuana. And I don't either. And I don't think that that should be the case. And so I asked, when they started making this argument, Department of Corrections Secretary, how many people, because I wasn't aware this was an issue in Florida, how many people are currently incarcerated in any state of Florida facility for either using marijuana or possessing personal amounts of marijuana? You know the number of people? 0. Not one person in the entire state of Florida. So if that's something you care about, just know it's not happening. Talk to your legislator. Have them say, like, okay, we can tweak something there. But I mean, I don't even think it's because it's not happening. But that is not a reason to give this weed cartel immunity and a captive market. No way. And so that is not happening. Now, if this passes, they're spending $140 million. Do you think if there's an effort to then say, oh, well, we should let Floridians grow their own, are they going to be supportive of that, or are they going to lobby the hell against it? They're going to lobby against it because it would cost them money. Of course that will happen. They'll probably say they're for it now, just like they said they were against recreational when they came in and did medical. Now they're pushing recreational. So, that's just not. Now, they'll also say, oh, this is going to be so much money for education and law enforcement and all this stuff. Yeah, I mean, I remember when they said that with the lotto, how it was going to be all this money. Anytime anyone's telling you that, you know they're selling you a bill of goods. And so if there's anyone in this audience who thinks passing Amendment 3 is going to lead to a windfall for education and law enforcement, please talk to me after this, because I've got oceanfront property in Arizona I would like to sell you. But don't even take the word for it. If you read the text of the amendment, there is nothing in the actual amendment that gives 1 red cent to education, law, or anything. And if you think about it, what'll happen, and I don't even know if the legislature will tax it. I can tell you what happens in Colorado. And look, when Colorado did it, you know, I was skeptical, but I was like, look, this is an important experiment, because they say people smoke marijuana, and that is true. I mean, in Florida, we got all the medical cards, you have other people do it, no one's in jail for it. And so they said, why not make it regulated, tax it, you'll get rid of the black market, and things will be better. Well, what happens is when you regulate and tax, it raises the price. So what's happened in Colorado? You've got a much bigger black market today than what you had before their thing passed 10, 12 years ago. And it makes sense, because when you remove any restrictions, use expands. And so the demand is greater. As the price goes up, black market undercuts that, and so we will have a bigger black market. So when they tell you they're going to get weed off the street that's coming from non-legal sources, that is not true. That has not happened in any state that has gone down this road. This is much more poor written amendment than Colorado or California. This is one of the worst horribly written amendments that's ever been proposed in Florida. Even if you like marijuana, this is a horribly written amendment. It's going to cause huge problems. So that's just the reality. You're going to have more black market, 100%. And so if you try to tax it, you'll end up like Colorado. Do they make money off their weed now in Colorado? No. They probably did for a few years. Now what happens is it just kind of collapses the revenue. So they've got a lot of their agencies that are looking. And I think it's also important there are people in Colorado who supported it when it passed who now say, don't do what we've done. There's people in California who now say, don't do what we've done. There's not very many people the other way, people that opposed it in Colorado and then said, you know, on second thought, this has worked out really well for Colorado, because it hasn't. So that's just right. And then the question is about kids. Now, I'm a dad. Our kids are second grade, first grade, and pre-K. It was interesting, my second grader, she asked my wife and I if she could have her own credit card, gets about the parental consent, and I told her, not a chance are you getting your own credit card. But I'm thinking as they get older, you know, what's going to be, and here's the thing, is there any argument that if Amendment 3 passes, that it will benefit children and kids? Is there any argument? No. What they do is they package the gummies. They look like Sour Patch Kids. You had one of the commercials. You had an ER doctor from California talking about what's happened in California. These young kids being rushed to the emergency room because they're downing these gummies. You know, dogs eat the gummies too, and that's very bad for the dogs. So it creates a lot of problems, and I just don't see, as a parent, how you can rather raise your kids like Colorado or California environment compared to Florida's current environment. It will make it harder to raise your kids the way you want to raise your kids. Why would we risk that? We know what's happened in these other states, and it just doesn't make any sense that we would do that. So this is, I think, a very clear example of, you know, one entrenched company trying to basically manipulate this constitutional amendment process in order to ensconce itself in our Constitution for their benefit, but to our detriment. And the question is that something you think is fine, you know, as a Florida citizen? I mean, I think back to constitutions are supposed to be things that are fundamental. There's supposed to be a reverence for the fundamental documents, whether it's the U.S. Constitution or the state constitution. It is totally inappropriate to use the Constitution in this way with what they're trying to do. So this is an easy one to say. And again, if you're somebody that likes marijuana, don't say you want to not have people in prison because they're not in prison. That's not a valid argument. Don't say you want money for education. That's not a valid argument. We know there's no money in here for that. But recognize what is going on here. Recognize that this is a corporate cartel that is trying to manipulate this process. And I just think that that's fundamentally wrong. And I can tell you on both Amendment 3 and Amendment 4, if it's the case that you can't win elections in Florida, they can't win elections here. They tried that 2 years ago. It didn't work out well for them. I can tell you in our state elections, they try to do all this. They can't advance. And so if it's the case that to change not just policy, but the Constitution, all you need is $100 million, $150 million, write some type of vague, misleading language, get it on the ballot, and somehow shoehorn it over the finish line. If that's what self-government has devolved into, then we are not going to have a very prosperous, bright future if this is what's going to continue happening. Because I tell you, if these pass, Katie barred the door, you haven't seen nothing yet. You are going to see a flood of this. You're going to see it every couple years. And you know, you may not agree with the speakers on 4 or me or what we said on 3. If you actually read this, contemplate it, understand, if you honestly think this is good, you know, it's a free country, right? But what I don't want is for people to, like, I saw a couple commercials and so I voted for it, and then a year later, you know, wonder why. Because the way this is written, it has no limitations on use of marijuana in public spaces. You would think that that would be something that's important. They actually, in the medical marijuana amendment that passed in 14 or 16, they have regulation of medical marijuana in public, that people can say you can't do it in public. This does not have that, and the way it's written, it will not allow either cities, counties, or the state to limit its use in public. And in fact, Colorado actually has very strong prohibitions against public use. Have you ever walked around Denver recently? Have you ever walked around Manhattan in New York City? People have moved from those places, particularly parents with kids, because of that. So just be prepared. We have this beautiful state, tourist destination. You have great beaches here in Pinellas County, and even getting through the hurricanes, we're working hard to help with the debris and get everything back spick and span, because it's a great part of the world. You will have this on beaches, you will have this in parks, you're going to have this on city streets. That will happen because it's happened everywhere, and this is more liberal in how it's written than any of those provisions there. And I don't think that's something good for Florida. And so I don't think it's going to help with tourism. I don't think it's going to help with things, quality of life, not at all. So these are really, really significant problems. So please go into it with eyes wide open. Do not be deceived. If someone's spending $140 million to try to get you to do something, you may want to stop and think about what it is they're trying to get you to do, and maybe it's not a good idea for this state. So thank you, guys. If you haven't voted, please go out and vote. God bless. All right. Thank you.
Keep up your good work.